I enjoyed your worship service. I liked the fact that it seemed intentional more than just checking through the boxes. And so I was very blessed to be with you today. We're eventually going to get to that, but it'll probably be 5 o'clock when we get there.
I got my slides messed up.
That's okay, but it's not a problem. I just wanted to give plausible deniability that they go, he didn't talk about that. Well, I'll talk about it at 5, so don't worry about it at all. Yeah, the other one.
He's going to switch it. He's got it.
Because I think I'm supposed to talk about some more intimacy. Yeah. I like the teddy bear picture, though. I think I'm a bear. My wife says I'm actually a groundhog. And I discovered a long time ago that my spirit animal is probably Wile E. Coyote, based on some of the stuff I get into and some of the things that happen. If you get X number of Wile E. Coyote patches, they'll give you a tattoo of Wile E. Coyote. And I'm 2 more hospital visits away from my tattoo. So just the stuff I'm involved in. I've got a torn PCL this morning. My shoulder crackled like Rice Krispie treats when I did a Kimura throw on a young cop on Monday, and something happened to my left elbow. So I'm not just playing about the Wile E. Coyote stuff. It's not the age, it's the mileage. Philippians 2. When you look at the letter that Paul writes to the church at Philippi, you get a sense of intimacy with these folks. But just think in your mind, how many actual hours, boots on the ground or sandals in the dust, did Paul spend with these people? We're not really told, but I think I can come up with 10 days or less that Paul was in these people's company, and then he leaves town. And one of those nights he's in prison. And yet, because of this very short interaction, you read this letter at the level of relationship that he has with these people. It's amazing that this seems to be intentional. And in order to build the best marriage ever, it has to be pretty intentional. Now, as we talked about in the morning worship, the ideal is to get to the top of that pyramid called love. Love is built on intimacy. Intimacy is built on trust. And you can't have trust without this balance between selfishness and selflessness. So when Paul talks to his audience writing this letter to the church at Philippi, he's basically going to use a small section of Scripture, give them some prescriptions, the things you have to take, things you have to do. He's going to give them some proscriptions, things that you don't do, and then he's going to give one sermon illustration. And that's basically Paul's message to these folks. And I believe it is the foundation for us to build the best marriage ever. If we could put this, basically the prescriptions and the proscriptions, into our relationships, I think it creates an atmosphere for the best possible relationship. Jim Baird at Oklahoma Christian in a thing called Leaders for Christ said there's submission, service, and forgiveness. And if you can do submission, service, and forgiveness, you can be somebody in the kingdom. That kingdom people are good at submission, service, and forgiveness. And if we can't do submission, service, and forgiveness, we can't be kingdom people. Submission, how I see myself. Service, how I see you. And forgiveness is understanding how God sees me on a daily basis. So let's explore what I would consider to be the outline or the basic principles for building the best marriage ever. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. And I like the fact that that's already on your wall. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or vain conceit. Now you get a contrast, but the opposite of selfish ambition or vain conceit. But in lowliness of mind, let each of you esteem others better than himselves. And let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interest of others. And that's on that board. You should just paint your wall and do the whole chapter. But that may get into your budget. I don't know. So here's what Paul says. He says, when you're interacting in a relationship, husband to wife, he's talking to a church. about church relationships. He's talking about, he'll call two women out, Euodia and Synecdoche. How'd you like to have your name mentioned in the Bible and it be the one where Paul goes, hey, that's, wow. I wouldn't want that to be my legacy. So Paul's really not talking about marriage. He's talking about relationship inside the body, inside the church. And we've been, we've done some things differently this year. I've spoken to a lot of empty rooms with just a camera. I've gotten on my computer and talked to folks. And I've done two things with that. One of them just for fun is that virtual church is not a new thing. One Sunday morning, right around 57 AD probably, somebody stood up and said, our guest speaker today is the Apostle Paul. Paul can't be here today, but here's his sermon. And read this letter to these folks. Okay, well, this has been going on a long time. They just didn't have the PowerPoint and the slideshow, but everything in the New Testament was virtual church. Paul was speaking to somebody from somewhere else. The other thing is, this is not church. What we do in this room here is worship. What we do out there is church. Okay? The old question of, talk to this guy, find out he's an elder in the church. Well, where's your church at? Well, one of them's at the post office. One of them's at Walmart. One of them's at the middle school teaching fourth grade. That kind of stuff. So what we do in this building is worship. What we do out there is church. This is how to church. This is how we act in our neighborhoods, in our homes, in our schools, and in our marriages. So don't do anything out of selfish ambition. I think if somebody said, Lonnie, you come to our place one time, you'll never be back. You can only preach one lesson. You can only preach on one topic. I would preach on selfishness. Period. Selfishness is the common denominator behind all sin. James chapter 1 says we're drawn away by the things that we want. And it's not what you want that makes us vulnerable to sin. It's that we have the capacity to want. If you analyze flying fatalities or rock climbing fatalities, they look for two factors: internal hazards, external hazards. When internal hazards and external hazards have an intersection, you get a tragedy. James chapter 1 says there's something you want. It functions as bait in a trap or as lure on a line. You are drawn away and enticed. And then when that opportunity, because something inside and something outside crosses, when that opportunity takes place, you get what we call sin. And then the writer says, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. And that's an interesting phrase in the original language, that death essentially is a stillborn. The byproduct of sin is not a viable life. And so selfishness is the common denominator behind all sin. I do what I do, my sin, and I'm guilty of sin, and so are you. My individual sin is irrelevant. My sin is the personal manifestation of selfishness in my life. And your sin, whatever it is the personal manifestation of selfishness in your life. So sin is the common denominator, selfishness is the common denominator behind all sin. Sin is the opposite of, selfishness is the opposite of love. Now wait a minute, Lonnie. The antonym of love is hate. Roger that. The antithesis or the antithesis of love is selfishness. It's about attitude, not about antonyms. Okay? Selfishness, or the measure of self-control, how well self controls you or whether you control self, is a measure of maturity in Christianity. If anyone would come after me, he must deny self, take up his cross and follow. You can't be a Christian and not get a handle on this self thing. Now, how do you know what a mature Christian is? It's not about number of appearances as a building. It's not the number of committees you're on. It's not up front, out loud, wearing a tie with a title. How do you know if a person's a mature Christian? Well, he'll bear fruit. It produces. You go to Walmart and you buy the vegetables and the apples. That's the produce section. The produce of the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and control of the self. Paul says when you start making decisions in your community, in your workplace, on your ball team, in your church, and in your marriage, don't let your motivation be a selfish agenda. James 3:16, for where you have selfish ambition, every evil thing exists. You want to open the door for any kind of evil? You can open that door with a tablespoon of selfishness. So when Paul writes to these people, says, hey, in your interactions with one another, don't let anything you do be done because of, number one, selfish ambition. Number two, don't let anything you do be done out of vain conceit. That's the idea where we look at ourselves and we inflate our price tag. We have this inflation on our self-worth. We have this idea where we almost become narcissistic, maybe not in the clinical sense, but where we think we're great. Self-made men worship their makers. And it's a monument to unskilled labor, by the way, Avon Malone used to say. So we can't do anything because of a selfish ambition or a vain conceit. My grandmother used to say, I'd like to buy him for what he's worth and sell him for what he thinks he's worth. You make a little money on most of those deals. If you've ever been in a conversation with somebody and said, you don't know who I am, then you don't know who you are. And it sounds bad, but I really don't care who you are or what you've done. The letters behind your name, the letters in front of your name. The price tag on your house or what's sitting in your garage. All those things are a gift. What did you do to deserve a brain that works? Eyes that see, feet that walk, lungs that breathe. What did you do to deserve to be born in America? What did you do to deserve to be born in Southern America? Now maybe you've taken the opportunity you have of having a brain that works and eyes that see and feet that walk and all those, wonderful. But you still didn't do anything to get that. And when we start looking at what I've done, what I've built, what I've made, what I've accomplished, you've just used a gift somebody gave you. And a lot of times we get wrapped up in our accomplishments or our titles or our degrees or our possessions, and we really don't realize it's just a gift. And if we don't see ourselves as gifted of these things, then it's easy for us to become arrogant. It's easy for us to have this thing of you don't know who I am. There's a story about a dinner on the ground, a big celebration. I think the story was told to me, it was in Texas. And they're serving food, and this guy's coming down the table, and this lady puts 3 chicken fingers in his plate. And the guy says, ma'am, I'd like to have more than 3 chicken fingers. And she said, well, sir, I'm only supposed to give you 3 chicken fingers. And he said, well, I need more than 3 chicken fingers. She said, sir, I can only give you 3 chicken fingers. He said, lady, you don't understand. I'm a big guy. I want some more chicken fingers. She said, sir, I'm only allowed to give you 3 chicken fingers. He said, madam, do you know who I am? And she said, sir, I don't know who you are. He said, madam, I'm the governor of the great state of Texas. Well, now she's embarrassed. She's chagrined. She's a little put off. She apologizes all over. She says, well, Governor, I didn't recognize you. I didn't recognize you without your suit. You look taller on TV. I'm so sorry. She said, but you probably don't know who I am. He said, lady, I have no idea who you are. She said, I'm the lady that hands out the chicken fingers. And it really doesn't matter what your title is. It kind of depends on where your stand relates to the chicken fingers. And if I'm on this side of the table and you're on that side of the table, guess who's got the power in the room? So sometimes we go into things thinking more of ourselves than we should, and we get really more worried about power than we do about influence. The church's job not to impress anybody. We're supposed to influence people. So Paul says, when you start interacting with your marriage or your community or your church, don't do anything out of selfish ambition. Number 2, don't do anything with this sense of vain conceit. But, contrast, in lowliness of mind. This is cognitive therapy. You change the way you think, you change the way you live. Period. In lowliness of mind, esteem others better than yourself. I just have to walk into situations going, I'm second. And how many times do we find in relationships of any kind where there's a competition? And most competitions end up in a zero-sum game. I'm right, you're wrong, I win, you lose, I'm happy, you're sad, my way, not your way. And anytime you get into that kind of a competition, your default setting is to be selfish. You have to be selfish to play checkers. You have to be selfish to play ping pong. You have to be. Now, that's not a bad way to be selfish. That's a competition. But when you start putting competitions into relationships and anybody starts keeping score, somebody always loses. So I've got to change the way I see my spouse. I've got to change the way I see my elders. I've got to change the way I see the people in my community. I've got to change the way I see the people I congregate with. I can't do anything because I'm selfish. I can't do anything because I have this false sense of importance about myself. And I got to change the way I see you. My friend, longtime minister friend of mine, Tim Orbison, says the most ridiculous thing that can happen in America is to have a car crash at a four-way intersection. Because at a four-way stop, guess what? Everybody's supposed to stop. And everybody takes turn. And he says, if you can get in a car wreck at a four-way intersection, somebody in that intersection couldn't pick cotton if he's made out of Velcro. Somebody's broken some obvious rules. It's my turn, it's your turn, it's his turn, it's their turn. But anytime anybody's selfish and doesn't think these other people have some place to go, and you think about road rage. You get mad because somebody doesn't let you have that lane. Well, they may need to be in that lane more than you do. They may need to go through that red light before you do. But what happens when we behave selfish? Just look at toilet paper shortages or gas shortages. I need it more than you need it. Well, I can't read your mind. I'm not in your car. You may need it, not me. But if we could ever just adopt the idea that I'm going to change my viewpoint, change the way I see myself, and change the way I see other people, it makes a dynamic change in my relationship. Now think about walking home and trying to compete with your spouse about treating the other one as the most special person there today. What would happen? Remind you of the little chipmunks on Disney. No, you first. No, I insist. What would happen if our children saw us treat each other with that respect? By the way, when you start measuring whether children are faithful in church or not, there's three things that affect that. What happens at home, what happens at church, and how influenced they are by popular culture. You can manipulate two of those three. You can affect what happens at church. You can affect what happens at home. And the dynamic of what happens at home is not dad to son, mom to daughter, mom to son, dad to daughter. It's how they see mom and dad treat each other. And if mom and dad are selfish and rude and disrespectful, they don't buy into what we're selling. So Paul says, look, here's your proscriptions. Don't do anything out of selfish ambition. Don't do anything out of vain conceit. Here's your prescription. In lowliness of mind, you esteem others better than yourself. And then don't look out just for your own interest, but also for the interest of others. When John Gottman, the doctor out of University of Washington, did his study and wrote the book, The Science of Trust, they did a trust metric. And when they did a mathematical and statistical analysis of trust, what they came to their conclusion was almost a verbatim quote of that verse. And Dr. Gottman's Jewish. Every time I've ever seen him speak, he wears a yarmulke. I don't know that he's ever read the New Testament. But when they do a scientific analysis of trust, it boils down to, are you just looking out for your interest, or are you looking out for the interest of others? Now, this is not a either or, but it's a both and. Don't look out just for your own interest, but also for there's a we factor there. I heard Muriel Hemingway, Ernest Hemingway's granddaughter, speak at a thing. And I'll just do it with you. Everybody here spell wellness. W-E-L-L-N-E-S-S. Now everybody spell illness. I-L-L-N-E-S-S. What's the difference in the two words? I versus we. When we're only focused on I, we get illness, and when we're focused on we get wellness. When I bring a young couple into my office to talk about their marriage or their pre-marriage, I want to hear the story of us. And if there's not a strong usness in that marriage, it's in trouble. If there's not a strong usness in that pre-marriage, it probably doesn't need to happen. And so Paul says you can't be in this thing, this marriage thing, two become one. And when two become one, there's no longer my this and my that, and you're this and you're that. It's our. And if we don't have an us in trust, it doesn't exist. So Paul says, don't do anything out of selfish ambition. Don't do anything out of vain conceit. Change the way you see yourself. Change the way you see others. In the lowliness of mind, esteem others better than yourself. And then don't just camp out on your agenda and what's important to you, but look at the interest of others. We call that attunement. Courtney Armstrong calls it alignment. One of the hats I wear is I get to teach de-escalation techniques to the police officers. I teach patrol tactics when dealing with the emotionally disturbed, and I teach a 40-hour certification class called Crisis Intervention Training. I do the mental health aspect to it and some of the officer safety aspect. But most of our communications when we run into people looks like this, if you can illustrate it. And your job in communication is to do this. That's attunement and alignment. I got asked to drive up to Columbia, Tennessee and talk to a bunch of crane operators. Big crane company bought little crane company. Both crane companies are fighting each other. Not the way we do business. I took a piece of paper and drew the number 6 on it. Put it on the table between these guys and said, add 3 to that number. And they went to fighting like cats and dogs. This side of the table said 3 plus 6 is 9. This side of the table said 9 plus 3 is 12. And I said, now swap sides of the table. Guess what happened? They went from this to this. All I've got to do is demonstrate that I can see your world from your perspective. Now, I don't have to agree with it. I don't even have to think it's logical. I don't even have to think it's rational. But if I can demonstrate to you, oh, I see why this is important to you, and I'm going to address it from that level of your viewpoint, guess what we just did? We took competition out of the room. When Jesus came and took on a form like us, why did he do that? Alignment and attunement. And so that's what Paul's going to use for his example. He says, don't do anything out of selfish ambition. Don't do anything out of vain conceit. In lowliness of mind, consider others better than yourself. And don't just look at it from your perspective, but look at the perspective of others. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. He said, I want you to have the same attitude, the same mindset, the same framework that Christ had. Who, speaking of Christ, being in the very form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. When Paul tells the story of Jesus, he does not start in the manger. When Paul tells the story of Jesus, he starts in the throne room of heaven. You know how to treat people? You want to know how to make this work? Don't be selfish. Don't be conceited. Look at other people as more important and attune, align to their interest. Well, here's your example, Jesus. And picture Jesus in the throne room of heaven. And it was not robbery. It was not inappropriate. It was not a faux pas to be equal with God. Now, I'm not sure if I can comprehend that. I'm Oxford educated, but it's Oxford, Alabama. Okay, so it's you know, my mind is kind of finite. We got to talk about people who are good at math. I called my algebra teacher. She had an MIT doctorate and taught high school algebra in Oxford, Alabama. She married some boy from Piedmont and got transplanted down there. I called her when I passed behavioral and inferential statistics. I was proud that some of the stuff she said lingered in my mind and it woke up in my mid-30s. And I didn't pay any attention to it in my teenage years. I had an inverse relationship with algebra and Marcia Carter. The closer she sat to me, the lower my grades were. The further away she was, the higher. I called Dr. Long, said, may I speak to Dr. Long? She said, this is Dr. Long. I said, Dr. Long, this is Lonnie Jones. She said, the Lonnie Jones? I said, yes, ma'am. She goes, and what correctional institution are we dialing from? I Miss Long, I'm not in prison. I've just earned anyway. I wasn't good at math. This counterintuitive idea that we can't do these things. So I'm not sure I can explain the triune God. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit. Without getting into modalism, the best way I can illustrate that is with a glass of water. You take a glass of water and you put it right here. What's the chemical formula for water? H2O. Lower the temperature, 32 degrees, 0 degrees Celsius. It becomes a hydroxide. We call it ice. What's the chemical formula for ice? H2O. You warm that water up a little bit, it becomes a water vapor. What's the chemical formula for water vapor? H2O. You can have a frozen stream, ice on the top, liquid water flowing beneath it, and steam coming off the top. It's all 100% water. 3 distinct manifestations. 100% the exact same object, the exact same substance, and it can exist in the same place at the same time and not be the same thing. You've got God the Father, God the Spirit, God the Son. In John 17, Jesus is in the garden talking to the Father about the Spirit. 100% God. You want to get a handle on this selfishness stuff? Let this mind be in you that was also in Christ Jesus, who was in the very form of God. And it was not inappropriate for him to be equal with God. But then something happened. He made himself of no reputation, and he came to earth in the form of a man. If we had a little more time, we'd explore some of those options. Jesus had options to come as a man. He could have been the wealthiest, most powerful king on the planet. If you can turn stones to bread, you can turn stones to gold. Foxes have holes, birds have nests. Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Jesus could have been the most popular person on the planet. He could have filled up the Colosseum every night, every seat, standing room only. Hey, I'll be at this location doing miracles. Y'all come. You could have filled every place up. But how many times did he resort to a solitary place to be by himself? And how many times did he do a miracle and say, don't tell anybody what I did to you? He didn't come to be an entrepreneur. He didn't come to be a rock star. And Jesus could have been a very powerful military leader. He tells Peter, hey, put your sword up. Don't you know that my Father will give me 12 legions of angels? We do a skit with our skit guys that is the viewpoint of the angels at crucifixion, ready to enter the atmosphere and being told to stand down. Very powerful. 72,000 angels. That's 12 legions. We sing the song, he could have called 10,000 angels. We miss it by 62,000 angels. Okay? One angel in 2 Kings 19 kills 185,000 men. You take 185,000 as your average batting average for an unarmed angel, and you multiply that by 72,000. I told you I wasn't very good at math. I made this statement in Tampa, Florida. A guy walks out, hands me a visitor's card, said, I'm an engineer. I said, I knew that. It's got scribblings on it. He says, if you grant a 10-hour day and a 185,000 kill ratio per angel, you can destroy the world's current population in 3.36 hours. That's faster than the virus you're afraid of. Okay? But Jesus didn't come as a rock star. He didn't come as an entrepreneur. He didn't come as a military leader. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ, who being in the very form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, and coming in the likeness of man, and being found in the appearance of a man, he became obedient to the point of death, even the death on the cross. He came in the form of a bond servant. 2 Greek words for servant, diakonoi, that's what we call our deacons. We transliterate the word, and then there's a Greek word called doulos. Doulos is your bond servant. Youngest, least educated, cheapest servant you could buy on the slave market. When you bought a bond servant and brought him to your house, his job was to wash the feet of the visitors. And his price tag was 30 pieces of silver. You want to change the dynamic of your relationship and have the best marriage ever, then what you got to do is quit being selfish, reevaluate your actual worth, reevaluate the value you place on other people, and then quit being self-centered and self-absorbed and become other-aware. And then whatever status you think you've got, be willing to abdicate it and be a foot-washing servant. Luke chapter 6, verse 40 says, a disciple who is perfectly trained will be like his master. If my master is a servant, the greatest thing I can ever hope to become is a servant. Now, what would happen today if you went home and served your spouse? And I'm not talking about sitting in an easy chair and bring them tea. I'm talking about meeting their needs. Ephesians 5, we've already talked about that Christ was submissive to the needs of the church. And what if we just met needs from the standpoint of being a servant? What if we were a servant in our community, in our congregation, in our school, in our workplace? What would happen to all our relationships? I'll tell you what would happen in your marriage. It would be the best marriage ever, because it would be full of people who are like their master. And if your master is a servant, then the greatest thing you can ever hope to become is a servant. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your inspired word. Thank you for your inspired writer. And thank you for giving us the insight to the pre-incarnation of Christ, that he was God, but for our sakes became a servant. Father, help us to learn that example, to live that example, and be a servant in our relationships. Father, thank you for this day and this congregation. We ask your continued blessings on our activities today. In Jesus' name, amen.